briefly about that. And then let me hit the button here. And then I will share a little bit about shoreline and some good practices for shoreline erosion. But before I start that, I want to retouch back on what Dave was saying about lake management planning. This was a process that was started a number of years ago with COLA. It got put on hold due to COVID. We were trying to gear it up this year, but as you know, staffing in many places and many changes have happened all over, and including in our office, and funding requirements and restrictions have kind of limited my time. I am hopeful I might have a grant to beef things up this fall and help kick out some lake management plans and work kind of individually with lake associations. So if Clearwater is interested, Hungry Jack uses theirs quite frequently, and Caribou are two that have had theirs completed. And it's really been a tool for them to be able to work with their neighbors, to work with new landowners, and to say, here's our priorities. Here's why we're doing this. It keeps our water clean. We want this to be on for years and years and years for generations to come. This is why we have this plan. It doesn't have to be a giant, robust document. It can be some goals and some actions, revisit it every few years. It can just have some basic information. Some of the lakes we're hoping to get some historical information so that younger generations, as cabins and different things get passed along, that information isn't lost and it's able to be shared from generation to generation. So there's a lot of different reasons for having those lake management plans. So I encourage you, if you're interested, I'm hoping to get some funding to have more time to be able to help. The other thing is those lake surveys that David mentioned. We did those back in 2017, 2018. Gave us a whole lot of knowledge to what all of you that live on the lakes are concerned about. We were able to see each individual lake maybe had a different concern compared to the lakes as a whole. So it's a really useful tool. They're totally anonymous. So if you just want to rip on it and be grumpy about it, go for it. I welcome that because it also provides a different insight and something that's needs to be understood. And so share with neighbors. We have, we'll use that as a tool to, again, just to guide the plans. I do not keep track of how they come in and who sends them. I don't have the time to do it and I don't have the interest. So it's totally anonymous. The interesting thing too is that we did this pre-COVID, and some of the questions were, you know, will people telework? Will more people come up here? What about more use on the lakes? Well, we've seen that in the last few years, which we weren't expecting to. It was kind of a survey to project 10 years out. So interesting to see if there are any changes, or maybe there won't be. So I encourage you to do those. Are there any questions on the lake management plan or the survey?
No, thank you. Not yet.
Great. So what I'll do now is jump in. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you are. I made you co-host.
Okay. Let's see. I've done this enough times, but I think I forgot to hit share. Hang on.
You're good.
All right, I'm gonna get her up and going. It's gonna take a minute because I have to get through the server at work. There we go. All right, so Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District, just a brief overview of who we are. We're actually not a county agency. That gets confused because we are fortunate enough to be one of only 2 districts out of the 80+ districts in the state that has a service agreement with the county. So we're able to be in the building, we're able to keep our doors open because of that, and we're able to work really closely with the county. So we are actually our own local government unit based off of the Minnesota State Statute 103C. We have a mission statement, we have a vision statement, we have a strategic plan. We are our own, truly our own government agency. We aren't funded, but we are an agency. We are there to maintain soil and water quality in Cook County by fostering responsible land use and by controlling soil erosion and non-point source pollution. That's what my board has decided should be our mission. We have 5 elected officials that govern us as staff. Those elected officials are different. You'll see, especially when you get your ballot this year, we're not like the commissioners. We're the commissioners. You only vote for who's in your district. Our Soil and Water Board has decided to be the lines of the conservation of the land, not of the population. So that's how they're broken up different than commissioners. So they have different lines in different jurisdictions. And that's why they decided just to have, because they want to reflect everybody. So when you see a ballot, you may see everybody's name on there, not just the person for your district. And for Clearwater, the representative is David Berglund. He is going to be stepping down after this year he's been on the board, oh my goodness, well over 15 plus years. And then his uncle was on the board. And so we are looking for a representative that's a year-round person to sit on our board. So if anybody's interested, we're not scary, we're not enforcement. We meet once a month, and then there's a few other duties, but we are looking for somebody to step up into that role. We have 3 full-time staff. That's kind of different in the past. So we're excited to have 3 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. We work with numerous volunteers, and we also have seasonal employees. So we're a tiny little office with a lot of work. We represent, the Arrowhead corner there. Then we also work closely with our neighbors in Lake County and in St. Louis County through different watershed planning efforts. Through Lake Superior North 1 Watershed 1 plan, we work closely with Lake County, Lake SWCD for the Rainy River headwaters, which we're just getting started, and we have a public meeting if anyone's bored. We're going to have that next Tuesday at the Seagull Community Center. It starts at 5. And so that is partnering with the North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District, St. Louis Conservation District, St. Louis County, Lake SWCD, and Cook County. And so what this is we work together to develop these watershed plans. We removed the political boundaries, which used to be up, and we're working together to work for the resources that are similar, that are in the watershed, and that are so that we're managing together, not just putting band-aids here, band-aids there, but have this collaborative effort. And it's working really well for the Lake Superior North. So it's exciting to start the Rainy River headwaters. So soil and water conservation districts, besides watershed planning, we also do other things. This is an example of a stream crossing on the Flute Reed River. We do cost share projects. And so the landowner will put in 25%, we'll put in 75%, and we're going to be cleaning up the banks, removing, this is an old road. It's one of the oldest roads over in Hovland. And so it used to be used, I think it's called the Diagonal Road, but it used to be an old farm road. You could see the culverts and the cement there. It's got moss and things growing on it. But what happens is the landowner needs to be able to cross this tributary without causing more erosion. So we're going to harden it. We need to re-meander the stream the way it should be, because it's now at a 90-degree angle, which is causing sediment, even as you can see on this really low water flow. We do things like coastal erosion. So this is an example just on Lake Superior. So we'll go out and do technical site visits and offer some information to the landowners that we can assist them with. This is one where we installed a project. So this one, we don't do hard armoring. So we don't do rock on Lake Superior. We try to promote more of a soft one. So this would be an example of putting in a coir log, and it's got rebar attached to it because of Lake Superior. We wouldn't do that with inland lakes normally. And then fill behind it with vegetation. And this is just the first right after its project's been completed, but it actually is growing and looks really well. So it's exciting. We do water monitoring. This is me back when I started in 2011. So I think it's funny. But we do a lot of water monitoring to support our volunteers, to support the lake associations. We're excited. Funding for this is really hard to get, so we've gotten creative with it, but it's proven just invaluable. And our area is known, thank you to everybody, Kay, and everyone who volunteers for doing water monitoring up here. There's a video, it was showcased around the state. So it's a great effort, and it's provided really good data and information to make land use decisions. We also do stream bank restorations. This is a project that went in. When you look at it, you couldn't tell it was so big until we have people standing on it. And it was a really delicate situation. They had to put coir log at the bottom. We used willows and tied them together. So they're live willows. And then throughout the years, they'll just keep growing, because that's what willows do. And then we planted around them with erosion control. We got to go back this year after it snowed and with all the rain and precipitation, and it's in a really clay bank and dark, and we weren't super hopeful, but it was been actually one of the most successful projects we've seen a year after. So we're really excited to see that. So it works. These things work. We also do things like rain gardens. This is at Best Western. If you're in town, you can go check it out. And it's just to help filtrate, if you ever see all that snow that's piled up by Lake Superior and rain, to help filtrate a lot of those parking lots. We work with aquatic invasive species. I know you've talked to Amanda Weberg. She was placed in our office a couple years ago, so we're excited to have her as part of our team. We do education outreach. Hopefully we'll start doing more now as things are a little bit different. but have a history of doing education outreach. So that's just a very broad overview of who the Soil and Water is and just some projects and things that we do. Let's talk Clearwater Lake. For those who haven't seen your lake, that's a huge lake. It's gorgeous. To the west is where most of the development is. And as you know, to the east is more the protected and the public land. Not that it's not protected where it's developed, it's just a different protection. But just to see, and so when you do your water monitoring, you're doing it more over towards the west end than the far east end. Just a quick overview of lakes, just in general. Clearwater is known as more of an oligotrophic to mesotrophic lake. It's very clear, it has low productivity. Fish are pretty good in it. Mesotrophic is, there's more plants in it, there's more organic matter. It tends to not be as deep, still good fishing, but once in a while you might see an algae bloom. And then that eutrophic lake, those tend to be more shallow. They're really productive, and productive means that there's just a lot more plant growth growing in it. You might not have as much oxygen in it. And a good example of a lake that looks eutrophic, and I'm not sure if it is Spin Lake, which is over by Hungry Jack, often gets really, really green. It's also very shallow. There isn't a lot of water moving in and out of it. It's not saying it's eutrophic, but if you went there a certain time of year, you could say, oh, that's eutrophic. So lakes kind of have what you would think is maybe a life cycle. We never see it in our lifetime, but you can also tell the health of a lake. And these oligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic have numbers that are associated with them. So you can tell how healthy your lake is and if it's changing and moving along the dial between oligotrophic and mesotrophic. So why should we care about Clearwater Lake water quality? Well, because you all live there and you love it, and it's got really good water quality. You want to keep it that way. Folks are getting drinking water from there. It's recreation, it's livelihood for some individuals. I thought this was pretty neat. Hopefully it's big enough just to see the lake levels. While we're doing water monitoring, I didn't do precipitation, which probably would have been good, but you can kind of see, last year was the drought, and it was interesting just to see how low that lake level went. It's related to precipitation, of course, and we had higher precipitation back in 2014, 2015. We're starting, this year's a little bit wetter. But when you're looking at water quality data, you need to keep everything in mind. I'm not a limnologist at all, but I have learned through experience that precipitation does impact water quality if you just look at snippets in time. And I'll give the example of this year. We had a really wet June, and I had folks calling me because their total phosphorus numbers were really, really high, especially if you looked at last year's. We didn't have precipitation much last year in June. So I went back in the data in 2015, we had a really, really high spike in June, and we had really high precipitation numbers. So just when you're looking at this, if you're really excited and you geek out on it, just to put the whole picture together and start to put those pieces together, not just a little synopsis here and there. There's a lot of data out there through the NPCA and through the DNR, through the lab, just looking at different data points. You can see all the data points of when water has been taken, samples have been taken, and this is just looking at Secchi disk and your transparency line. Also kind of goes interestingly with your lake level, which probably matches precipitation lines. And then here's another website just to show, this is our lab that all the samples get sent to. And it's just showing, again, just the both sites, and things are looking good. Things aren't changing that much. You don't see a lot of trends, just still really good water quality. If there's questions, just let me know. So we're going to talk a little bit about erosion, because erosion is one thing that can impact water quality, and it's one thing that most landowners can have some control over. Nature is going to do her thing. She's always going to erode a little bit, and she's going to have her impacts. For example, Lake Superior actually has a natural flow of erosion, just like rivers do, and a sediment transport. And so that sediment transport is important for the health of the ecosystem of the lake and of the river. So it's natural to have some erosion. It's natural to have some sediment deposition. It's when we get that excess and when we get a lot of nutrients and overland flow that is going to impact your water quality. So some causes of erosion are due to unstable soils, due to surface or groundwater. And I'll go a little bit more in depth with these later. Wave erosion from both boats or natural occurring waves. A lot of boat action can really hammer on the landscape, and it's not maybe meant to have that sort of wave action. Ice dams, I know Clearwater Lodge has had ice dams and wave combined. and they've got some good bluffs over there. And so that can really impact your erosion. Large bluffs with unstable soils or that are poorly vegetated, stormwater overland, and then just a lack of vegetation buffer. So these are things that we see often when we go out and do site visits. And normally the number one thing we see is just controlling that surface water and then that lack of vegetation. So a real buffer does not equal a mowed lawn. So if you look at these three pictures and you say, okay, great. So those are different erosion issues, different heights, different areas. And if you look, they all have one thing in common: the lawn is mowed. And every single one, there's no natural buffer. And it's not to say that if you have a natural buffer, erosion isn't going to occur. Of course it is. But right here, what we always see most of the time is that there's just sheet flow coming off of houses or buildings. There's no way to filtrate the water from sediment, from nutrients, from anything. It's just going right over. You've got wave action hitting. So it's kind of a double whammy. You've got overland flow, you've got flow from the lakes, just causing a lot of issues. So we don't recommend lawns. We recommend at least at a minimum of a 3 feet buffer, but the larger you can provide, the better. So if you're wondering, well, I don't know if I have erosion or not, and maybe it's a little bit not significant. How can I tell? You're going to want to look at the water near the shore. Is it kind of cloudy after rain events? And some of that might be natural, but it's if you're continually seeing it be cloudy, that's often an indicator that you've got a lot of nutrients flowing down your lawn and reaching that water. If you might start to see algae blooms or green scum or a lot of plants growing because plants need nutrients. Our lakes in Cook County are nutrient low, which is why we don't have a ton of plants. I mean, yeah, we have plants and that's necessary for aquatic life, but we're not seeing a ton of stuff. So you want to look and see if you have a presence of growth in water from excess nutrients such as nitrate and phosphorus. Oh, Dave, are you good? I see there's a funny little wheel.
We're good. I think.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, excellent. You might notice washouts, trenches, small piles of sediment. You might see leaves or debris just at the bottom where there might be water flowing. So that might also be an indicator that you're going to have erosion issues or that you just don't have a good enough buffer to the lake. So what does a healthy shoreline look like? I'm going to use more Lake Superior pictures only because we have a lot of projects out there and we have a lot of landowners willing to share their projects. So this is a healthy shoreline. This is the East Bay Suites. And if you know, they get hummeled by the winds and the waves on every spring. So when you're looking at your shoreline, your goal is really to prevent as much erosion as possible. This is on Devil's Track Lake, and this is a landowner looking down from their house. And so you can see they already have a buffer, but they're like, you know what, we need to make this more robust. We just did this development. We know we're going to have some sheet flow coming down. What can we do? So we worked with them to install a larger buffer. They're going to minimize their overland flow from snow and water. So what we did is we work with the landowners to also put gutters and redirect it away from the lake. This buffer then will help protect, it's not grown, this was only the first year, but protect and filter the water from nutrients. And the other thing we're also really encouraging people to think about, especially with our climate getting warmer and our rain events becoming heavier and more sporadic, is warming water. So, you know, you've got hot roofs, you've got warmer temperatures. If you got a lot of warm water going into our cold lakes, it may not happen in our few years, but it might happen long-term that it can really change it. So really just thinking about how can we keep the water in the landscape? How can we slow it down? How can we help with reducing those nutrients and sediment and that warm water from entering our lakes? So this is just an example of a house in a picture. And so you'll see that they have a little bit of a buffer. I personally would say shrink that beach up a little bit, but they've got vegetation going in. The one thing too you can think of is they don't have any gutters in the house. So when that rain flows, it's going to go straight down. There's a little bit of buffer, but redirecting the rain with rain gutters or rain barrels is really a really important thing. So just a different visual. This is at Rockwood. So again, just another example of a buffer. They don't have to be huge. They don't have to be elaborate. This was the second year, I believe, or third year after it was installed. And it's just a practice. We put in a lot of native plants and some mulch and said, grow little plants, and it looks really good. And it's great that they did this to try to help filter and also to help with ice and to help with the snow, and especially with our high lake level last summer, you know, just keeping things at the lake instead of up on land and towards the building. So just a little quick background. What does a shoreline look like if you could cut it in half and look at it as if you're looking through a piece of pie at a piece of pie? You have your open water down there, and then you've got your floating and submergent vegetation. That's where we see, you know, some of our, that's vegetation. It's often where the light can reach. Some lakes have a lot more than others. You've got your emergent vegetation, and then you've got your lake bank, and that's where you really want to make sure you're starting to get that buffer in. And then you've got the upland, where again, just if you can plant a few shrubs here and there and keep things on the land and help hold that soil in, it'll benefit the water quality. It's really nice for pollinators. It just looks really good. So you're saying, okay, so this sounds like a lot. Maybe I do want to do this. What would it look like? So I'm going to give you some examples of, or an example of what it would look like from start to finish to do a shoreline restoration. And you can make it as elaborate as you want, but they're really not that hard. This is a couple of things for site consideration is how you're comfortable with chemicals. There are some chemicals that work really well by water. Not everybody's comfortable with that, but for example, on the left, that one was done with chemicals and a spraying, and just to kill it because we needed to get it in really quick. The one on the right is done with a black plastic, and you want to remove the invasive species, and it just is killing off all those plants so that you're able just to plant right into the vegetation. Again, they have a buffer on the right, but they're increasing their buffer. Next, and East Bay is going to be my example here. They hired a crew to come in, and they hired a private landscaping boreal natives to come in and do their work. But they prepped the soil, it's just raking it. They threw in a bunch of seeds, again, covered up the seeds. And then they had thousands of plugs because it's not just going to grow by itself. You can't just have a few seeds and hope that's going to work out. And when you do your seeds, we always recommend a cover crop. So that helps to hold the soils in place. Otherwise, native plants take forever to get established. We have learned a couple years, and everybody gets really impatient and worried, and we're like, just hang on. So we always recommend a cover crop of some sort of seed, some sort of oat, and just to keep letting it grow up and seed until the native plants can take over. And then we recommend an erosion blanket to hold that seed in place. And then they went through and just cut little tiny holes for thousands of plugs. It took a couple of days and just plugged them in. And here they had to put in netting and fencing because of the geese right on the lake. So here's what it looked like in 2016 before the project started again. And this was cleaned up after a major storm. Often this gravel and the rocks and the beach would end up right against the building. So they called and said, we can't do this anymore, but we don't want to hard armor. We want to try some soft armoring. This is what it looked like in 2019. So they do have to clean it out every year because the plants will die down, and they added a few more boulders just for a little bit of extra protection because our events are bigger, but they still have that nice walkway, and they have this beautiful pollinator habit. Here's what it looks like last year. So this was just a different section of it. So it's growing, it's doing great, it's thriving. And we really recommend more of a native habitat and more of a soft armoring than hard armoring on any lakeshore and waterfront property if it's possible. So few best management practices to keep in mind is you want to direct that rainwater away from the shoreline, so your gutters, your drain pipes, etc. I know on Clearwater you have large bluffs, and it's like, well, where are we going to put all this water? We've worked with landowners on Clearwater to just have them extend drain tile all the way down. So you're either hitting bedrock, which I know doesn't really happen up there, but just somewhere where you can get it so it's not going to create more erosion. Also just promoting putting it into the woods. You can't move water to your neighbor's property and redirect it there and cause issues there. That's actually against the law, but we just try to help you figure out ways where you can put the water. Minimizing your footpath down to the lake. You don't need a runway. It's sad when we see these giant runways get put in. Why do you buy lake view? We'll cut a few trees down, but keep that path smaller because it helps, again, just creating that buffer, and then maybe have a larger area down by the water, but just minimizing your path. Keep as many trees and shrubs as you can. It can reduce runoff by up to 50%. We really promote using native plants for shoreline buffers and just try to prevent erosion where you can. So how can we help as the Soil and Water Conservation District? We have an annual tree sale. So if you want on that list, we can help you with that. It does sell out sometimes within like 48 hours, but the trees, we try to have them native to here. There's a lot of discussion about climate change right now and what plants to use, what trees. We are working on trying to figure out those answers also, just so everybody knows, because that's been a big question. We provide cost share, so we can pay 75% of projects, and we just ask that you pay 25%, and that can also be in kind. So maybe some of your time. Free technical site visits if you're like, well, maybe I just want somebody to come and walk around. I know we've had people that have had Firewise and then have had a lot of questions because they've maybe had erosion issues or trees questions. So we're able to come out and provide that assistance. And then we have a ton of resources. So if you're interested, just give us a call. We're on the website for the county. We don't have Facebook or any social media. We are kind of, that's not our thing. Sorry. And I'm the oldest one in the office, so it's kind of funny, but we don't see that that's where our energy is spent. We found it better just to work and call people and do more of those efforts. So with that, I can entertain any questions you might have. Except for I can't see you, Dave, just so you know.
I think I can fix it.
What questions are there for Ilena?
I have a question, I don't know if she can hear me, I can repeat it.
I can repeat it. Yeah.
Is there a list of like native perennials that she recommends for shoreline buffer, specific up here? Because I've done rain gardens and things in the cities, but we're so far north, what works really well up here? Because that looks really beautiful outside that.
Ilena, that question is, do you have a list of native plants, perennials in particular, that can be used for shoreline buffer?
We do. And what we normally do, I'm just writing this down. If you want to give us our office a call, we can provide that information. The other thing is that we what we always do too is recommend look and see what's growing around your property. What's right along the shoreline? Do you have a lot of red osier dogwood? Do you have nine bark? Do you have roses, columbine, thimbleweed, whatever, and make that list. And we also can help with vendors. We have a list of vendors to be able to buy native plants with. So yeah, give us a call. We can help out as much as we possibly can.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Please.
Ilena mentioned Lake Superior several times in this discussion. Can you describe the division of labor in your effort in your shop between Lake Superior and the inland lakes?
Yes, we don't have a division of labor. We just work all the time, but anywhere. So we're charged with helping private landowners throughout Cook County. So it doesn't matter if you're at the end of the trail, in the middle of the woods, we have done that. We have gone Schroeder, Hoveland, Lake Superior is just often they have a lot more issues because of the waves and the water levels. So we get a lot more phone calls, but we service anyone that needs help. So yeah, Lake Superior, we just did a huge project with landowners last summer, a huge education outreach where we hired an engineer and we did site visits on Lake Superior because we get so many phone calls. So we had written a grant and we did it in conjunction with Lake SWCD. So there's that partnership. So yeah, we have been we've done projects on Clearwater with landowners, just whoever. We're just heavier on Lake Superior because they tend to call us more is all. So yeah, feel free to call us. We're happy to do site visits now that we are fully staffed again. We are a bit more available for helping people out. And if we have a lot of landowners who are like, hey, I want to do this, we can sometimes put 3 or 4 landowners together. We are a grant funded office. I always say we're a government unit that's a nonprofit government unit because only 14% of our funding is stable. The rest is all grant funding. And if you've been, I'm putting my little plug in, if you've been watching legislation and they didn't go back to special session, we currently are at stake at losing around $120,000 a year after 2024. So we are truly grant funded and dependent on grants. So when people call us and they say, hey, we have projects, we want to do this, the more people that call us, the more we're able to put things together and come forward and write grants. And we're really good at it. We've been doing it. I've been doing it for 12, 15 years. We work on grants. For example, we did culverts in Schroeder. Friedenberg Creek is one of the coldest streams on the North Shore. It's kind of a secret, but I just let it out. It's got trout. It runs through the Night Harbor. So we worked closely with the mines, and we were able to put in $500,000 worth of new culverts so that those trout and everything can get through. And you can say, well, they're the mines, they can pay for it. We know that, but they're also maybe not going to care as much as we do and the rest of us do. So we worked with them and we're able to get these culverts in. So our grants can be $5,000 to $1 million. We just need projects. So
Nikki raised her hand on the line. You have a question, Nikki?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, for a lot of people, you've mentioned the last time you've been there, and you've been there quite often. So that's good. How much erosion has been kept up with, and how much is new since the last time you've been there with Clearwater Lake, not Lake Superior, and not
Yeah.
draining down from the streams here in town?
that's a
So I
good
was just
question.
wondering, it seems to me they're doing wonderful. A lot of people are taking a lot of care. So I was curious. Thank you.
Yeah, Nikki, thanks for asking that. I haven't been on a boat on Clearwater other than on the boundary water side. So I can't honestly answer that. We did a little shoreline assessment 4 years ago, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And, things were looking good then. I think everybody just needs to keep doing what they're doing. So, and keep encouraging neighbors to do the right thing. So yeah, I can't answer that because I haven't been out on a boat. It's a lot easier to see erosion from a boat than it is from the land.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. And how was it when you were out on the boundary waters part?
Great.
Yeah. All right. Thank
As
you.
always.
Elena, at the COLA meeting yesterday, there was several discussions about the wave riders in some lakes. These great big things that are doing tremendous damage to shorelines. Are you encountering that in your present travels right now?
Can you explain your question a little bit
The wave
more?
riders, some of the lakes are, they're 400 horsepower things that they're going right close to shore and they're causing all kinds of damage, and people are trying to eliminate them, trying to point out maybe through your office the extent of the damage that's happening. Do you have just a couple insights on that?
We actually haven't gotten any phone calls. The only time I actually hear about it is at the COLA meetings from the wave. We have a lot more people concerned about drinking water for the lakes, because the more boat usage is turning up sediment and it's clogging people's filters. We don't work with drinking water. If you have concerns with drinking water, you have to go across the hall from us, which is Land Services. But as far as boat concerns, no, we're getting a lot more calls about people concerned about tree species to plant due to climate change and the spruce budworm die-off that folks are seeing. And then we're also concerned about algae blooms. And currently right now we have Didymo popping up around Lake Superior, but I know some of our inland lakes last year, for example, Devil's Track at the end of October had a toxic algae bloom. It's the first one I'd heard about since I've been at my position, which has been since 2011. So we are keeping a close eye, and we actually are working on what's called a 9-element plan for the Devil's Track watershed that goes all the way up to Junco Creek and over to Woods Creek. And it's a 10-year plan with funding that we will be working very closely with those landowners to install projects, provide education outreach throughout the watershed, and try to figure out maybe what's going on, what can we do to help that water. Because for example, their lake is seeing, I'm totally rambling, sorry, Dave, but their lake is seeing declining water quality. And so we are trying to help grasp what's going on with that. Good questions.
Any more questions for Elena? We're really grateful for such an informative presentation and for the work that you're doing around the county, and especially to learn that it's all grant funded. It obviously means you've got another job, which is securing your funding on a year-by-year basis, and it's remarkable. We're grateful for that. Thank you especially for taking time on a Saturday to be with us.
Bravo.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to see you all. Hopefully I'll get to see some of you in person. And again, just reach out to our office, give us a call if you have questions or just need anything. We're always happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.